They say the West was built by two kinds of men, the kind who made the law and the kind who broke it. Cole Haddon was the second kind. He rode alone, always alone, with a duster coat the color of old ash, a hat pulled low over eyes that had seen too much, and a reputation that arrived in every town 3 days before he did. Wanted, Cole Haddon, dead or alive. $2,000 reward. $2,000 was more than most families in 1887 earned in 3 years. Yet here he was, still breathing, still riding, still one step ahead of every bounty hunter, every marshal, every crooked lawman who'd tried to collect. Cole wasn't proud of what he was, but he wasn't sorry either. Not yet. He'd spent 12 years moving from territory to territory. Kansas, Colorado, New Mexico, Nevada. He never stayed anywhere longer than 2 weeks. Staying meant getting comfortable. Getting comfortable meant getting caught. His horse, a big black stallion he called Ember, was the only living creature he trusted. And even that trust had a limit. Cole had no family left. His mother had passed when he was 9. His father, a rancher, had been cheated out of everything he owned by a railroad company and a corrupt judge when Cole was 17. By the time Cole was 20, he'd done the one thing he swore he never would. He'd taken the law into his own hands. What started as justice became habit, habit became identity, and identity became legend. On a gray Tuesday morning in October, Cole rode into a small valley town called Mill Haven, Texas, population 312. He hadn't planned to stop. He never planned anything anymore. He followed his gut and the direction the wind pushed him, but Ember had thrown a shoe 2 miles back, and the nearest blacksmith, according to a weather-beaten sign on the road, was in Mill Haven. Cole pulled his hat lower, rode in slow, and told himself the same thing he always told himself. 2 days. Maybe 3. Then gone. Mill Haven was the kind of town that looked like it was holding its breath. The main street was wide but quiet. A general store, a saloon with a broken window, a small church at the far end with white paint peeling off its walls, a barber, a post office, and a schoolhouse. With a little red schoolhouse with smoke coming from its chimney and the faint sound of children's voices drifting through its open windows like music. Cole barely noticed it. He tied Ember to the post outside the blacksmith's, arranged to have the shoe fixed by afternoon, and walked to the saloon. That was when he heard the first whisper. 2 men at the bar. Rough types. Trail dust on their boots, meanness in their eyes. Cole sat 2 stools down and ordered water. He didn't drink anymore, hadn't for 4 years, and listened without appearing to. "You see Decker's men ride in this morning?" one man said. "3 of them," the other muttered back. "Set up at the old mill. Word is Decker himself is coming end of the week. Lord help this town. Lord ain't been helping this town for a while now, friend." Cole kept his eyes on his glass. The name Decker tickled something at the back of his memory. Silas Decker, land baron, criminal. The kind of man who bought politicians the way other men bought boots. Cole had crossed paths with Decker's operation once before. 2 years ago in New Mexico. He hadn't liked what he saw. He told himself it wasn't his problem. He had Ember to think about, a shoe to fix, a road to get back on. Not his problem. He saw her for the first time at noon. Cole was sitting on the steps of the general store, eating an apple, watching the street with the careful eyes of a man trained to notice everything, when the door to the red schoolhouse opened and the children came spilling out for their midday break. And then their teacher. She was small. That was the first thing he noticed. Small and slight, with dark hair pinned back practically under a gray bonnet, a plain blue dress with chalk dust on the sleeve, and round spectacles that made her look like she was always reading something, even when she wasn't. She carried a stack of books in one arm and was laughing at something a small girl had just said to her. A real laugh, unself-conscious, head tilted back slightly. Cole found himself staring. He looked away, took a bite of apple, looked back. She was now crouching down to the level of a small boy, maybe 7 years old, who was crying quietly. She set her books down in the dirt without hesitation, took both of his hands in hers, and spoke to him. Cole couldn't hear the words, but he watched the boy's face change, watched the tears slow, watched a small, uncertain smile break through like sun after rain. She stood, patted the boy on the head, picked up her books, and walked toward the general store. Cole looked back at his apple. "Excuse me." He looked up. She was standing 3 feet away, watching him with polite curiosity and zero fear. That surprised him. Most people who didn't know him were cautious around him anyway. Something about the way he held himself, or maybe just the look in his eyes. People who did know him, or thought they did, kept their distance entirely. This woman looked at him the way you'd look at a stranger on a train. Just a person. Just another human being. "You're new," she said simply. "Passing through," he said. "Everyone says that when they come to Millhaven." A slight smile. "Most of them end up staying, not me. Well." She shifted her books. "Welcome anyway. I'm Margaret Ellis. I run the school." He didn't offer his name. He never did in new towns. She noticed. Didn't push. "The general store has wonderful dried apricots if you're hungry," she said instead. "Mrs. Hooper keeps them behind the counter. They're better than the apples, though don't tell the orchard that." And then she walked past him and into the store. Cole sat very still for a moment. Then, without entirely meaning to, he followed her in and bought a bag of dried apricots. That afternoon, while waiting for Ember's shoe, Cole made the mistake of wandering. He walked to the edge of town where the old mill sat, half collapsed, and saw what the men in the saloon had been talking about. 3 riders. Hard men. Armed. They'd set up a camp just outside the mill, and they were watching the town with a particular kind of attention. The attention of men cataloging weaknesses. Cole recognized the type. He'd been that type once. He watched them for a while from a distance. One of them was writing something in a notebook, taking inventory of what? Cole's jaw tightened. He walked back to town, got Ember. Told himself he was leaving, but at the road out of Millhaven he stopped, sat there in the saddle for a full minute. Then he turned Ember around and rode back to the saloon. He'd stay one more night, just to see what Decker's men were doing. Just that. It took Cole less than 24 hours to piece it together. He was good at gathering information without asking questions. 12 years on the run had made him an excellent listener, an invisible presence in the corner of any room. Here is what he learned. Silas Decker owned a cattle empire spanning 4 counties. He was coming to Millhaven for one reason. The Millhaven Valley, was some of the richest grazing land in Texas. Rich soil. A clean river running through it. Natural shelter from the winter winds. Decker wanted it. And Decker's way of getting land was simple. He sent men ahead to make the current owners miserable. Small fires, ruined crops, intimidation, and if that didn't work, legal manipulation through judges he'd already purchased. Millhaven had no marshal. Their last one had left 6 months ago, and the county hadn't sent a replacement. The town had filed complaints, written letters, sent telegrams. Nothing had come back. They were alone, and they were about to be squeezed until they cracked. Cole heard all of this in pieces, at the bar, in the barber shop, from 2 old men playing checkers outside the post office. He heard something else, too. "It's Miss Ellis I worry about," said one of the old checkers players. A man named Gus with a white beard and a permanent squint. "She won't leave," the other one agreed. "Decker's men came to the schoolhouse last year when they were still just feeling us out. Told her the school would be closed, turned into a storehouse. She told them, and I heard this myself. She said, over my living body." The other man chuckled, but it was a sad chuckle. "She's not from here, you know. Came down from Ohio 4 years ago. Some business back there. She doesn't talk about it. But she stayed. Built something real with those kids. Half the children in this valley learned to read because of her, and Decker doesn't care about that. Decker doesn't care about anything that doesn't have a dollar value." Cole stared at the checkerboard without seeing it. He thought about Margaret Ellis standing in the dirt without hesitation, setting down her books to comfort a crying child. He thought about the words she'd used. Welcome, anyway. Nobody had welcomed Cole anywhere in a very long time. That evening, he was eating in the small diner next to the saloon when she walked in. She came in alone, ordered coffee and a biscuit, sat at the table by the window, and opened a book. Cole watched her for a moment. Then he did something he hadn't done in years. He walked over. "May I?" he said, gesturing at the empty chair across from her. She looked up, studied him briefly over the rim of her spectacles. "You're still here," she said. "Shoe needed time to set properly," he said. It wasn't entirely a lie. She gestured at the chair. He sat down. They were quiet for a moment. The diner was nearly empty. Rain had started outside, soft and steady. "What are you reading?" he asked. She turned the cover toward him. "The Count of Monte Cristo." "Alexandre Dumas," he said. She blinked. "You've read it?" "Twice," he said. "Once in a bunkhouse in Kansas, once in a jail cell in Nevada." She studied him with more interest now. "Which part are you at?" he asked. "The part where he comes back," she said. "Transformed, unrecognizable. That's the best part, is it?" She tilted her head. "I find it sad. He became so good at being someone else that I wonder if he ever found his way back to who he really was." Cole had no answer for that. She looked at him a moment longer, then back at her book. But she didn't ask him to leave. And he didn't go. It happened on a Thursday morning. Cole was at the livery stable with Ember when he heard the commotion. He walked out into the street and saw two of Decker's men, big, ugly, confident the way men are when they work for someone powerful. Standing outside the schoolhouse, school was in session. Cole could hear the children inside. One of Decker's men was nailing a notice to the schoolhouse door. The other was watching the street with his thumbs hooked in his gun belt. Margaret came out. She read the notice. Her face didn't change, didn't crumple, didn't go pale. She reached up, pulled the notice off the door, and tore it cleanly in half. "This is a school," she said. Her voice was quiet and steady. "These are children. You will not come here." The bigger of the two men laughed. "Ma'am, Mr. Decker arrives Saturday. By Sunday, this building's going to be a grain store. I'd suggest you start finding somewhere else to hold your little lessons." "I suggest you leave," she said. The man stepped closer. Cole was already moving. He came to a stop between Margaret and the two men. He didn't draw. He didn't threaten. He just stood there, and something in his face, in the absolute stillness of him, the cold, patient look in his eyes, made both of Decker's men pause. "The lady asked you to leave," Cole said. One of the men's eyes narrowed. "Who are you?" "Nobody important," Cole said, "but I'm standing between you and her, and I'd like you to think very carefully about what happens next." A long silence. The two men looked at each other, then they walked away. Cole turned around. Margaret was looking at him. Not with relief, exactly, more with quiet assessment. "Thank you," she said, "though I had the situation handled." "I know," he said. "Then why?" "Because I was standing there anyway," he said, "and it seemed easier." She almost smiled. "Who are you?" she asked. The same question Decker's man had asked, but different, softer, genuinely curious. "Cole," he said. Just his first name. First name was safe. Cole. She said it the way she might test the weight of a new word. "Are you staying in Millhaven?" "I don't know," he said honestly. And that was the truest thing he'd said in years. That evening, Cole sat alone at the edge of the river outside town. The water was moving fast, fed by the week's rain. The stars were out, enormous here, the way they only get in open country, away from everything. He thought about leaving. Counted the reasons. He was wanted. His presence brought danger wherever he went. He had no stake in this town. He didn't know these people. He'd built a careful, solitary life that kept everyone safe, especially from him. He thought about Margaret Ellis tearing that notice in half. He thought about the way she'd looked at him. Not like an outlaw, not like a wanted man, just like a person. "Over my living body," she'd told Decker's men last time. Cole stared at the river. He wasn't leaving Saturday. He'd made that decision before he even finished the thought. Friday came with bad news. A traveler passing through, a peddler from San Antonio, recognized Cole in the street and said his name loud enough for half the town to hear. "Cole Haddon? You're Cole Haddon." And the town changed, not all at once, not dramatically, but like a tide pulling back. Men who'd nodded at him in the street now kept their distance. The diner owner was suddenly very busy whenever Cole walked in. The general store took a few extra minutes to serve him. Cole had seen it before. It never stopped feeling like a cold hand around his throat. He heard the whispers, outlaw, wanted man, dangerous, and then, the one that surprised him. What's he really doing here? Could be working for Decker. He was packing Ember's saddlebags that evening. Genuinely this time, when he heard footsteps behind him, he turned. Margaret. She was holding 2 cups of coffee, one of which she extended toward him. He took it without speaking. "You're leaving," she said. Not a question. Seems like the smart move. For who? He looked at her. I'm not a good man to have around, Miss Ellis. You've heard the name by now. I've heard a name, she said. I've also seen the man it belongs to. They don't match up the way people seem to think. You don't know what I've done. No, she agreed, but I know what you did yesterday, and I know what I see when I look at you. What do you see? He asked. He wasn't sure why he asked. It felt dangerous to ask. She considered the question carefully, the way she considered everything. Someone who's been carrying something heavy for a very long time, she said, and who's forgotten that you don't have to carry things alone. The silence stretched between them. The horse shifted. The lantern in the stable swayed. Decker arrives tomorrow, Cole said finally. I know. He's not going to come with conversation. I know that too. And you're still not leaving. Of course not, she said, as if the question barely deserved an answer. Those children deserve a school. This town deserves to choose its own future. I didn't come here to run away. Cole looked at his coffee, looked at her, looked at the saddlebag he'd been packing. He set the saddlebag down. You need someone who knows how Decker operates, he said. We do. Someone who knows how to organize a defense without anyone getting killed. That would be useful. Someone who can negotiate, or make clear that negotiations isn't optional. All of that would be very helpful, she said. I'm not a hero, Cole said, clearly, directly. I want to say that out loud so there's no confusion later. Margaret looked at him over the rim of her coffee cup. Nobody is asking you to be a hero, Cole, she said quietly. Just a decent man. One day at a time. Think you can manage that? He was quiet for a long moment. I can try, he said. Silas Decker arrived at noon on a gray, windswept Saturday. He came with 8 men, a lawyer in a black coat, and the easy confidence of a man who had never, in his memory, been told no and meant it. He was 60 years old, broad-shouldered, silver-haired, with the kind of distinguished look that newspapers called impressive, and that Cole had always thought was just cruelty wearing nice clothes. The town of Millhaven came out to the street. Not hiding, not fleeing, standing. Cole had spent Friday night and Saturday morning doing what he'd done across 12 years of survival. Organizing, planning, making quiet arrangements. He'd spoken to every head of household in town. He'd outlined what Decker would try, how it would unfold, and what the town could do, not with guns. He was insistent about that. You come out armed, Decker has an excuse to escalate. You come out as a community, unified, calm, unafraid. You take away his narrative. Old Gus had looked at him. You sound like a general. I sound like someone who's made every mistake you can make, Cole said. I'd rather not watch you make them. Decker rode down the main street and found it lined with people, men, women, children, not the youngest ones, but the older ones, standing with their parents, and at the front, standing alone in the middle of the street, was Margaret Ellis. Beside her, to her left, one step back. Cole Decker's horse stopped. Decker looked at the street, looked at the people, looked at Cole. A slow smile crossed his face. Cole hadn't, he said. Well, I never expected to find you playing shepherd. Mr. Decker, Cole said. These people have something to say to you. I don't particularly. They're going to say it anyway, Cole said. The question is whether you listen or whether you want the embarrassment of what happens after. Decker's eyes narrowed. Is that a threat, Haddon? It's information, Cole said, which is different. What happened next took 3 hours. Margaret spoke first. Calmly and precisely, she outlined the town's legal position. She'd been up all night with law books borrowed from the county records. She cited statutes, land rights, prior claims. She was thorough in a way that visibly surprised Decker's lawyer. Then Gus spoke. Then the Reverend. Then a rancher named Alcott who'd been in the valley for 30 years. One by one. The whole town. Decker tried 3 times to interrupt with legal pressure, with implied threat, with the slow grind of his usual tactics. Each time, Cole said one quiet sentence that moved the conversation back. He didn't draw. He didn't threaten. He didn't need to. What he had, and what a man like Decker had never quite encountered, was absolute steadiness. He'd stood in worse places than this. He'd faced worse men. He had nothing to lose and, for perhaps the first time in a decade, something small and fragile he wanted to protect. That made him more dangerous than any gun. At 3 o'clock, Decker pulled his lawyer aside and had a conversation Cole couldn't hear. Then Decker looked at Cole. "You know there's a price on your head," he said. "I know," Cole said. "I could send a telegram tonight." "You could," Cole said. "But you won't." "Why not?" "Because this whole street watched this conversation. And if a wanted man helped a town stand up to you, and then you had him arrested for it, that's a story. That's a newspaper story. And you've spent a lot of money making sure your name doesn't end up in newspapers in the wrong way." A long silence. Decker looked at the street, at the people, at the schoolhouse at the far end with its slightly peeling white paint. He looked at Margaret Ellis, who was watching him with the calm, direct gaze of a woman who graded papers, and settled disputes between 7-year-olds and had long since lost any fear of men with loud voices. Decker put his hat back on. "I'll have my lawyer review the land claims," he said carefully. "There may be a misunderstanding about the boundaries. It wasn't a surrender, it was a retreat. But in the West of 1887, that was often enough." He turned his horse around. His men followed, and the town of Millhaven, Texas, exhaled all at once. That evening there was an impromptu celebration at the saloon. Well, those who visited the saloon celebrated there, and those who didn't gathered at the church hall with pie and coffee. Cole sat at the edge of the church hall celebration, watching people laugh and shake hands and feel, for the first time in months, like themselves again. Margaret found him there. She sat beside him, didn't speak for a while. "You're going to leave now," she said eventually. I know." She paused. "The warrant, the wanted poster. It doesn't go away because I helped a town for 2 days." "No," she agreed. "It doesn't." Cole looked at his hands. Hands that had done things he couldn't undo. Hands that had today done something he didn't regret. "There's a circuit judge," Margaret said carefully. "Judge Amos Whitfield. He rides through this part of Texas twice a year. He's an honest man. Old Gus knows him. He takes sworn testimonials from town residents and they carry weight in the court system." Cole was very still. "That's not a guarantee," she said. "I won't pretend it is. But it might be a path. A slow one, a legal one." "Why are you telling me this?" She was quiet for a moment. "Because you stood next to me today," she said. "Not in front of me, not behind me, next to me, like a partner. And I haven't." She stopped, started again. "I came to Millhaven because I needed to build something. Something mine, something steady. I think you might need the same thing." Cole looked at her, in the warm lamplight, with the sound of people celebrating behind them, with the wind outside and the wide Texas sky above. He felt something he'd spent 12 years trying to outrun, not danger, not trouble. Hope small and fragile and terrifying. "I'm not a good bet, Miss Ellis," he said quietly. "I'm a schoolteacher in a small town who just faced down a land baron with law books and sheer stubbornness," she said. "I don't make safe bets. I make the right ones." He almost smiled. It didn't quite form. But it was close, the closest he'd come in a long time. "Cole," she said, "will you at least stay through the week, until Gus can write to Judge Whitfield?" He looked at the celebration, looked at old Gus laughing with the Reverend, looked at the small boy from the schoolyard who'd been crying that first day, now running around with a piece of pie, completely unbothered by the world. "1 week," he said. She nodded, satisfied. 1 week, she agreed. But they both knew what 1 week meant. It meant he was, for the first time in 12 years, willing to try. And sometimes that's where everything starts. They say the West was built by 2 kinds of men, the kind who made the law and the kind who broke it. But maybe that's not the whole story. Maybe the West was also built by the quiet ones, the teachers and the ranchers and the old men with their checkerboards, who got up every day in the face of hard things and chose to stay, chose to build, chose to hand something better to the next generation. And maybe sometimes, the men who broke the law found their way back, not in a blaze of glory or a dramatic redemption, but slowly, quietly, 1 week at a time, in a small town with a red schoolhouse and a woman who gave them back a thing they'd forgotten they were allowed to have, a future. Cole Haddon stayed through the week. He stayed through the month. Judge Whitfield came in December, and the testimonials from Millhaven ran to 11 pages. The path was long. It took 2 more years, a lot of patience, and the particular brand of stubborn hope that Margaret Ellis had in seemingly inexhaustible supply. But in the spring of 1890, Cole Haddon rode into Millhaven for the last time as a wanted man. He rode out of it as something else. Home was a word he'd forgotten the meaning of, she reminded him.